I have miles and miles ahead of me, tales to listen to, time to spend. Up ahead, the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
Hello, I'm Charles Kuralt. We're off again to meet a few people on the back roads of America. These are people you know, not from the front pages. They've never been on the front pages. They're people you know from next door and down the block. Their stories are some of my favorites from 25 years on the road. Come meet some people who've found their places and have stayed in them. Federico Cisneros, his place is a centuries-old Spanish mission in Abo, New Mexico. Federico Cisneros has been here his whole long life, tending the stones and the memories. Arlene Snow's place is on the banks of the Chesapeake. She has to be here, you see, so that she can talk to the geese. And here is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. A couple of hundred years ago, in a room of this building, the principles were argued out from which America would not budge. Our first stop, however, will be in North Dakota to meet a man who wanted to leave his place once, but Vernon Evans is a farmer, and farmers simply don't go gadding about. We turned in at the mailbox of a Dakota farmer, Vernon Evans. He tried to leave Gilstrap Township, North Dakota. Lord knows he tried. Vernon Evans was pictured in one of those famous 1936 photographs leaning against his Model T, Oregon or bust. He and his wife made it to Oregon, but pretty soon that hard Dakota farm called him back. 50 years later, the Ford is a Chevrolet. Everything else is about the same.
Yeah, the first winter we was married, that winter it was 6 weeks steady. It never got above zero. And there was about 4 weeks, I don't think it got much above 40 below. And every other day about was a blizzard. And that's the way we spent that winter.
Living in a little old shack.
In the winter, there was the cold. In the summer came the grasshoppers.
They ate the clothes right off of a person when they was outside if they were sweating or anything.
I think it was a fall.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I think the fall of 28, I was helping a neighbor up north here harvest. I started in the harvest with 3 brand new shirts. When harvest was done, I didn't have no shirts left. They ate them right off of you.
The grasshoppers?
The grasshoppers.
When you were farming, how did your typical day go?
Well, I suppose we was up 4:30 in the morning. Get up and have our breakfast and milk our cows and do our chores. And go to the field. Come in about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and do the chores again. And a lot of nights I went out after the chores and supper was over and worked till 1 o'clock in the morning in the field.
The old Depression photographs come back to mind as you listen to Vernon Evans talk about the blizzards and the plagues of grasshoppers and the 20-hour days. And what came of all his labor?
Well, I'd say 6 or 7 years about, so we lost anywhere from probably 50% of our crop to 100% of our crop was hail. And, I think about 3 years we dried out. That was 59 was one of the bad years for drought. Our corn got about that high.
That must just break your heart when you walk out in the field and see that.
It didn't quite break his heart, but it gave him ulcers so bad he couldn't ride the tractor anymore. After the drought of 59, he turned the work over to his son Clifford. And now the farm and the drought, hail, and cold are Clifford's to worry about.
Every few years something happens.
Like what?
Well, this last summer was a drought. We sold a bunch of our cows on account of no pasture. We had the hay, but we didn't have no pasture to run through the summer.
How do you know the same thing isn't going to happen this year?
Well, that's farming. You always take a chance. Thinks things are going to get better, I guess.
My grandparents come in 1904, and my uncle come in 1904. And then my dad come in 1906.
And you were born right here?
I was born 3/4 of a mile west of here.
Do you really believe things are going to get better?
Well, they don't look like it, but everybody's hoping.
They've been hoping on this farm for 82 years and 4 generations, and things have got no better yet. Clifford Evans's father tried to get away to Oregon, but had to come back. Clifford and Geraldine Evans have no intention of ever leaving, and their son expects to take over the farm someday. They are the stubbornest people in America. They are farmers. They have taken everything the markets and the Lord could hit them with, and they're still here when the sun goes down on the frozen plains, and they'll still be here in the morning. The Canada geese are on the wing, and listen to that old gander, will you? That is the authentic sound of December in the Chesapeake Bay country. But take a gander at that old gander. She's Earlene Snow, who learned goose talk 60 years ago down home at Powell's Point, North Carolina, and has been conversing with the Canada geese every autumn since.
Now, most callers use a call, right?
Yes, a
little
mechanical call. They do. It's easier.
So
And,
why do you do it your way?
I do it because that's the way I learned. And to me, it sounds more natural than the mechanical calls. They've got the right name. They sound mechanical.
With thousands of geese wheeling overhead, we drove the on-the-road bus around the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge in Maryland, stopping now and then for Mrs. Snow to have a chat with her friends.
Look at him turn.
He answered that time.
Again and again, we watched geese turn in the air to come toward her. And watch this. She converses with feeding geese and flying geese and swimming geese.
He knows you're a goose, he just doesn't know what kind.
Mrs. Snow and her husband Jarvis, a decoy maker, hunted geese in their youth, but she says she hasn't the heart to shoot them anymore. Her husband says she practices her goose calls now purely for the thrill of seeing the birds close up.
Calling is something like opera singing. You got to do it every day.
When she talks to geese, they talk back?
They sure do.
She's good, huh?
She's the best.
How many earthbound mortals can communicate with the birds of the air? Earlene Snow is a rare woman, a woman of the outdoors who loves all the creatures of nature. But these are the ones she loves best.
Oh, it's such a beautiful sight.
In the midst of a great loneliness in New Mexico, where we went to see an old church, we discovered a story of devotion. The church is the ruined Mission of San Gregorio de Abo, built in the 1620s at the edge of a big Indian pueblo, vacated in the 1670s, a victim of drought and epidemic and Apache Indian raids. These old stones stand silent now. San Gregorio de Abo is utterly abandoned, except by one man. Federico Cisneros takes care of the mission. He took care of it as a child when it was part of his family's sheep ranch. His father told him to keep the sheep away from the ruins. This was holy ground. He took care of the mission after his family gave it to the state. He was paid $10 a month at first. He would have stayed here for nothing.
You must really love this place.
I love it. I was raised here and I sure love it. I don't change it. It's for the whole United States.
You wouldn't give it up for all the rest of the country, huh?
No.
And now that the mission is a national monument, Federico Cisneros stays on as the resident Park Service ranger.
You must be proud to be the oldest national park ranger in the country. Huh?
They said I am the oldest. I don't know if that's be true or not. But
I imagine it's true, Mr. Cisneros.
That's what they say.
He has been here for 93 years caring for these old walls. I told you, this is a story of devotion.
1905, part of the wall falling down to the west side.
He remembers that.
The east side,
He shows the stones cracked by the fire the Apaches set. He thinks about the hundreds of people who once attended Mass in this lonely place.
after they left here, never come back no more.
The whole 350-year history of the mission of San Gregorio lives in Federico Cisneros.
You feel you belong here?
Yeah, I belong here. And I'm supposed to be buried here too. You see that tree over there? I like it to be buried over there.
I thought you would like to know that one small part of the national legacy is in good hands. These hands, which record the infrequent visits to the mission and keep every paper in order and every stone in place. There wouldn't be anything left here if it weren't for his life and work. Makes you want to say thank you. Gracias, Don Federico.
I say, let us wait. John Dickinson of Pennsylvania stood on this spot July 1st, 1776, and begged the Continental Congress to be reasonable. The time is not yet ripe for proclaiming independence. Instead of help from foreign powers, it will bring us disaster. I say we ought to hold back any declaration and remain the masters of our fate and our fame. All of Great Britain is armed against us. The wealth of the empire is poured into her treasury. We shall weep at our folly. John Dickinson was not a timid or frightened man. He was a great old Quaker patriot, and he had a good argument. At the moment he spoke, British grenadiers were sweeping down from Canada, British guns were bombarding Charleston, and just 90 miles away, an incredible British armada was entering New York Harbor. 500 ships carrying 32,000 troops, the best army in the world. That army could march to Philadelphia and take this building and arrest this Congress any afternoon it chose to do so. So John Dickinson pleaded, let us not brave the storm in a paper boat. The delegates paid him respectful attention. John Adams and his cousin Sam, hot for independence, impatient with the delay, sat over here, listening. Thomas Jefferson sat back here in the corner. He had already written the Declaration of Independence. It spoke his thoughts. Beside him here, old Benjamin Franklin, also silent, his mind made up. But every mind was not made up. Pennsylvania and South Carolina were opposed to independence. Delaware divided, New York undecided. All through the spring and into the summer, they had sat here and wrangled, their tempers growing hot with the season. Young Edward Rutledge of South Carolina, who sat here, had said of John Adams and the New Englanders, they will bring us ruin. I dread their low cunning and those leveling principles which men without character and without fortune possess. And John Adams had said of Rutledge, Ned Rutledge is a perfect bobolink, a swallow, a sparrow, a peacock, excessively vain, excessively weak. Now, Rutledge and Adams and the rest listened to John Dickinson speaking gravely from the heart. Declaring our independence at a time like this is like burning down our house before we have another. It was John Adams who rose to his feet. He was not John Dickinson's equal as a speaker, and everything he had to say he had said before. He never said it better than on that July afternoon. We have been duped and bubbled by the phantom of peace. What is the real choice before us? If we postpone the declaration, do we mean to submit? Do we consent to yield and become a conquered people? No, we do not. We shall fight. We shall fight with whatever means we have, with rusty muskets and broken flints, with bows and arrows if need be. Then why put off the declaration? For myself, I can only say this: I have crossed the Rubicon. All that I have, all that I am, all that I hope for in this life, I stake on our cause. For me, the die is cast. Sink or swim, live or die, to survive or perish with my country, that is my unalterable resolution. That night, John Dickinson went home, put on his militia uniform, and rode away to join his regiment. He could not vote for independence, but he could fight the British. That night, Edward Rutledge changed his mind. South Carolina would not stand in the way of unanimity. That night, Caesar Rodney, a man dying of cancer, rode through the night on horseback in a storm to Philadelphia to cast the deciding vote for Delaware. And so when Secretary Charles Thompson called the roll on July 2nd of the 12 colonies voting, all 12 declared for independence. It was done. What remained was the declaring it. The next morning, July 3rd, an anonymous note was found up here on President Hancock's table. It said, "You have gone too far. Take care. A plot is framed for your destruction, and all of you shall be destroyed." It suddenly occurred to them that there might be a lighted powder keg under this floor. There was an uproar. There were volunteers to search the cellar. Then crusty old Joseph Hughes of North Carolina, who sat here, stood up to say, "Mr. President, I am against wasting any time searching cellars. I would as soon be blown to pieces as proclaim to the world that I was frightened by a note." Without searching any cellars, the Continental Congress proceeded to a consideration of the Declaration of Independence. They are immortal words now, but of course they weren't when Charles Thompson read them for the first time, when in the course of human events, and for 2 days Jefferson sat back there in the corner and fumed as they all toyed with his masterpiece. Did we really have to call the king a tyrant quite so often? They changed some of the tyrants back to king. Did we have to bid the British people our everlasting adieu? They struck that out. And Jefferson's mightiest passage, his denunciation of slavery, that was struck out too at the insistence of Georgia and South Carolina. Jefferson wrote elsewhere, "Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than that these people are to be free." But finally, all the cuts and changes were done, and what remained was a document still noble enough to inspire the tired delegates and bold enough to hang them all. It was read through one more time to the end. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. There was one final vote, and President Hancock announced the result with the use of a new phrase: "The Declaration of the United States of America is unanimously agreed to." There was no cheering, no fireworks, not yet. The delegates simply walked out into the night of the 4th of July thinking their own thoughts, some of them, no doubt, remembering what John Dickinson had said. "This is like burning down our house before we have another." Others hearing Tom Paine, "The birthday of a new world is at hand. We have it in our power to begin the world all over again." John Adams walked to his boarding house to write a letter to a friend. "Well," he said, "the river is passed. The bridge is cut away."
Well, time to say goodbye until our next trip together. We've heard about a story up the road here, but we kind of hope we never get there. With luck, we'll stumble upon something more interesting along the way. I can see the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
All these years I've been a-wondering, just when I think I'm near the end, I always see the road is bending, and I wonder what's around the bend.